It's a good morning to you. Welcome to Asake Online. My name is Zenzel Ndebele, and today we bring you the special program. It's Trade Fair time, and this is the time where, everyone from Harare comes to Bulawayo. We wish Trade Fair was happening every 3 months, because we get all the services at the trade fairs in Ara. Everyone is there. Yesterday, I paid my bills at the city council stand. In less than a minute, I had been served. But if you go to the revenue, all the queues are just so. One of the things, besides everything else, for me, trade fair brings the convenience for all the services that are offered. But also we get to meet the diplomats. They come down. We saw them at the trade fair. And today I'm joined by the American ambassador. We've had her in this program before, so it's not the first time. But we have the pleasure of hosting her again at the trade fair, and we'll be talking to her about one or two issues that are interesting. Ambassador, thank you for joining us.
Sali Banani.
Yeah. It's nearly, you've been here for almost a year.
10 months.
Yes, 10 months. And, one of the interesting things we'll be saying to you, or my first question to you will be, in the 10 months, what would you say have been your achievements?
Well, it's been a whirlwind 10 months. Obviously, there's so much to learn when you get to Zimbabwe, even if you've been studying it for years in advance like I did. So I've just felt like I've really had a chance to get to know the country and get to know the people a lot. That's been a huge thing for me. And trying to just establish those relationships with the government has been really satisfying. Working with partners in the government on advancing our mutual interests. And focusing on how to advance probably our most important mutual interest, which is the economic prosperity of both of our countries by increasing trade and investment. And we've established partnerships with the government and trade organizations, including the American Chamber of Commerce and private sector, to figure out what are the impediments to improving trade and investment and how can we remove them so that both of our companies in both of our countries can benefit.
Talking about that, Zimbabwe, removed the tariffs on American products. Does that translate to increase the investment and American products coming to Zimbabwe?
Well, that remains to be seen. We saw President Mnangagwa's tweet about that, but obviously we're still waiting to hear from the government on what's entailed in that offer and what it all means for U.S. imports.
On the flip side, what has been your challenge in the last 10 months?
Well, I think the challenges remain the same. Our goal here has always been for Zimbabwe to be a self-reliant, self-sufficient country that can stand on its own 2 feet. I'm sure I told you that in September when I was here. And so we're trying to work with the government on increasing its own self-sufficiency. But as you probably saw in Secretary Rubio's Independence Day message on Friday, that economic prosperity is built on strong democratic institutions. Those things you can't separate the two. And so, we remain concerned about certain things, the shrinking civic space here, obviously the passage of the PVO bill, which we don't believe is, in line with international best practices for regulating private voluntary organizations, the corruption, which seems to be worsening according to Transparency International, and just the arbitrary detention of journalists and the people around the Avondale 78, those sorts of things that give people concern about investing in a country like Zimbabwe. And so we have conversations with the government about the importance of maintaining the civic space. And we think that strengthened civic space and democratic institutions will really fuel that economic prosperity the government wants and needs.
I know it's early days with the PVO being signed into law, but there have been these international conversations that have been happening around the debt clearance and the IMF meetings. With this law being signed, what are the chances of Zimbabwe navigating its way through the international monetary organizations?
Well, we remain supportive of the AFDB structured dialogue on reforms so that Zimbabwe can get its arrears cleared. But obviously certain reforms have been offered and agreed by the government. And so we're looking to see progress on those so that we can get the economy back where it needs to be.
The U.S. is pivoting from the traditional aid to focusing more on trade and investment. In your view, what do you think will be the impact of the trade, not aid approach to Africa?
Yeah, well, as you know, with our new administration, we are moving from an assistance-based relationship to more of a partnership, more trade and investment to tie us together. And that means less assistance in many of our programs here, but many do remain, are continuing at the moment, particularly some of our HIV programs and our emergency food assistance for food insecure families. Those are continuing. Some of our exchange programs, many of our exchange programs continue, which is really important for Zimbabweans who want to get to know the United States better and understand us and build that mutual understanding. So some of the programs are continuing, but we are looking to partner with Zimbabwe on more of an equal footing and transition away from that dependency that Zimbabwe, frankly, has been asking to end for some time. The government has said that they can handle these programs and continue them in the future. They have the resources and the ability to do it, and I take them for their word at that.
Yeah, it's quite interesting on that, and we'll see how that goes. But also, there have been comments like sometimes African countries feel like the relationship with the West in general could be more patronizing and bullying towards Africa. What would you say currently is how do you think how do you think the Africans view America at the moment?
Well, I can't speak for Africans, obviously, but I think that the U.S. brand here is actually pretty strong. When I travel around the country, there's a huge appreciation for what we've done. Since 1980, when we were the first country to recognize Zimbabwe's independence, and we've been the largest bilateral donor since then, contributing $5 billion to the health and welfare of Zimbabweans since 1980. $3 billion of that in the last 3 years alone. I think Zimbabweans really appreciate that the U.S. is here to help them and on their side. And as you may have seen, I think just yesterday, our special envoy for Africa, Mr. Boulos, mentioned that Africa remains a high priority for President Trump. So even though our assistance might be decreasing somewhat, that doesn't mean Africa is unimportant. It's just not measured in how much assistance we give.
I mean, I know we partly talked about this, but when you arrived here 10 months ago, one of your priorities was, the relationship between, the UK, I mean, the USA and Zimbabwe that has always been rocky and complicated. After 10 months, what would you say is the relationship as it stands now?
Well, I still think there's some room to grow. I see statements by the government that still evince a little bit of distrust in the United States. I've tried to be an open and frank and respectful partner with them, happy to have these conversations. I got to see the foreign minister twice in January, and we would like to see even more engagement so that we can narrow those differences.
Lastly, there's this always, I don't call it competition, but there's always the perceived competition between China and America and other African Western countries when it comes to Africa and Zimbabwe in particular. How do you, as America, navigate the Chinese interests, the American interests vis-a-vis Zimbabwe's interests?
Well, we don't see it as a zero-sum game, first of all. And second of all, we would never tell Zimbabwe who it can and can't be partners with. I really think there's room for investors from everywhere in Zimbabwe. So we have no opposition to Chinese investment or Chinese influence in general. We do think the Zimbabwean people deserve investors who respect the environment, respect labor rights, and provide transparency about any debt that the government is undertaking as a result of these relationships. We believe U.S. companies bring a lot to the table in terms of high quality investments that do those things, that observe environmental laws and respect the people who are working for them and provide broad-based economic growth for the country. So again, I think there's room for all of us here, and we should all expect quite a lot from our investors in Zimbabwe, whether they're from China, the U.S., or anywhere else.
I think finally, I would say your next year, what are your priorities when it comes to Zimbabwe-American relations?
Well, as you pointed out, we'll be transitioning away from an assistance-based relationship to one more on trade, and really trying to identify those things that we can improve in Zimbabwe to make it more competitive, so that more high-quality investors from around the world are interested in putting their money in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe likes to say that it's open for business, but everybody's open for business. And so the competitiveness of Zimbabwe is what's going to make investors decide to bring their money here instead of countries in the other parts of the region or other parts of the world. They're looking for the most stable, the most predictable investments anywhere. And U.S. companies have a lot of choices, so it's going to be very competitive.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that interview and clarifying and talking about some of the issues that we always talk about. Well, that was the American ambassador. We were talking to on a number of issues, but we as Zimbabweans always ask, is Zimbabwe really open for business? Is our environment, conducive enough for other people to do business? We are at the trade fair. Let's see how many people clinch deals, as they always say. My name is Zenzele Ndebele. Let's meet again in other programs.